So let's start with the general picture. Then the general picture is an education system that is very indoctrinating, first of all, from cradle to grave in many ways. And indoctrination does not come only through educational system, it comes through the media, the discourse of the politicians, the army, which is a very important tool of socialization in Israel. So if you look at all these institutions, you can see that there's a very clear image of the Palestinian, which people are educated about and informs their position later on. It begins by the historical image of the Palestinian as an alien, as someone who has no right to the country and was there as a nomad or instigated by other forces to try and stop the amazing project of the return of the Jewish people to their ancient homeland. So there is an historical perspective of the Palestinians as landless people who are trying to prevent violently a very just and noble project of the creation of a Jewish state. Then there is a more contemporary images of the Palestinians. And what is really troubling when you look at the textbooks and the education system, there is a clear attempt to connect the history of anti-Semitism in Europe with the Palestinians' actions against Zionism until 1948 and Israel after 1948. Namely, there seems to be very little hope for a graduate of the Israeli education system to understand that the violence, and there is violence in some of the Palestinian actions against, first of all, the Jewish community until 1948 and the state of Israel after 1948, that violence is a reaction to the violence of the colonizer, of the occupier, which they would learn about, the FLN in Algeria, the Mau Mau in Kenya, or even Gandhi in India, if you want, resistance movement, anti-colonialist resistance movements in the world, and they would cherish them. They would not deem them to be anti-Semites or terrorists, but they are able through the education system to exceptionalize the Palestinian resistance as a continuation of the classical anti-Semitism. So they do what they do because they hate Jews, because who the Jews are, not because what this particular group of Jews is doing to them and to their homeland. So that's a very difficult image to deal with. And of course, it instigates hate, racism more than anything else, and dehumanization of the Palestinians. In my case, although I was a product of this education system, obviously I was not a very successful product. And I was not alone. And looking at, unfortunately, but we're a small group of people, not a large group of people, who somehow this very indoctrinating machine did not work on us. Why didn't it work on us? Each one of us has a different explanation. We are different stories, but we have some things in common. For instance, I was born in Haifa, which is far more mixed cities than most cities in Israel. So I had a more intimate relationship with the Palestinian society, and it's much difficult to dehumanize people you know as neighbors and so on. Secondly, I did my studies outside of Israel, getting out. You can see things you cannot see from within. I had the fortunate chance to be mentored by Palestinian and Arab professors in Oxford, where I went to do my PhD. And so when I returned to Israel, I already returned with a very different view. And of course, my research substantiated for me these issues. And there was a point around 2002, which continued for about 4 or 5 years, when I realized that you cannot go against the grain from within. I mean, you can try, and I did try, but they will destroy you. and they expelled me from the university, and that's why I had to go and teach in England. Uh, and writing books was the one thing. Writing books in English, not in Hebrew,
mm,
is one thing they could not rob me of. I mean, they could rob me of my job in the university.
mm,
They might still rob me of my citizenship, which they didn't do until now. That's why I can go in and out to Israel and to see my Palestinian friends and so on. But that might change. But they cannot prevent me from publishing books in English. I wish I could publish books in Hebrew because I also want to educate
mm,
my compatriots. I think they should know as well. But that's more difficult because publishers here in Israel will not publish me. But but at least I wanted to share because I knew there were a lot of good people there who know nothing about Palestine, and if they knew, they would be much more active in trying and help and end the suffering of the Palestinians. And I think my book, The Ethnic Cleansing, and for many people around the world did the job.